Good afternoon or evening, depending on your local time zone. My name is Candace Hyatt, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the California Public Utilities Commission, speaking from our office here in Sacramento. On behalf of the Public Utilities Commission, the Energy Commission, and the Air Resources Board, I want to thank you for joining us at this virtual job fair. The state of California is proud to be international leaders in energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, and global sustainability programs. We have some of the most aggressive renewable energy, transportation, electrification, and climate change policy goals in the world. We are seeking innovative thought leaders and dedicated public servants to help preserve and protect our planet and help our communities. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you are having any connectivity issues, please contact the WebEx host. Please feel free to submit your questions to any of our presenters through WebEx chat feature. These questions can be submitted at any time during the presentation and will be answered at the end of today's event. To view the slide presentation and our live presenter simultaneously, please view the presentation in full screen. Today's presentation is intended to give you an opportunity to learn more about our agencies, job openings, and the hiring processes here in the Golden State. We have welcome addresses from our agency principals, agency-specific presentation, a presentation by CalHR, and a Q&A session. Our agencies are on the front line of environmental programs, and we are excited to present our current opportunities. Please enjoy these welcome addresses from our agency principals. President Michael Picker from the PUC, Chairwoman Mary Nichols from the Air Resources Board, and Chairman Robert Weissenmiller from the Energy Commission.
Hi, I'm Michael Picker, and I'm the President of the California Public Utilities Commission. We, along with our partners at the California Energy Commission and the Air Resources Board, the ISO, the Resources Agency, and CalEPA, are all actively working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in California. We're the agency that finances the construction of massive infrastructure through the electric industry, through some of the other industries we work with. We think that we can be successful on driving greenhouse gas emissions out of our industries. We need your help. We need qualified, talented staff with skills in policy analysis, economics, tax law, and energy to help us actually carry out this task. If you're interested, we really want you to consider us and to talk to us about the opportunities here at the PUC. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Nichols, the Chair of the California Air Resources Board. CARB is California's lead agency in the fight against air pollution and climate change. We've been clearing California's skies for more than 50 years, and we have the results to show for it. Cars are 99% cleaner, and cancer risk from air pollution has been reduced by nearly 70%. The state is on track to achieve our 2020 climate target, and planning for our longer-term goals continues while our economy is thriving with new green jobs and clean energy investment. Our path to clean air and climate resiliency involves rulemaking based on strong science with robust stakeholder engagement and enforcement. The regulations we create drive investment and innovation, leading to new technology from the catalytic converter to zero-emission vehicles. The key to California's success is our diverse, professional, and committed staff of scientists, engineers, economists, lawyers, and policy analysts. Thanks to the efforts of this talented workforce, we've made a lot of progress over the last 5 decades, but more work remains. So, if you're interested in working on world-leading programs to create a better future for our people and our planet, consider applying to join us here at CARB.
I'm Bob Weissenmiller, Chair of the California Energy Commission, and I invite you to join us and to help change the world. We're looking for committed scientist engineers who will help continue our tradition of being a world leader in energy efficiency, cutting-edge research, the expansion of renewable energy, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and to address the challenges of climate change. Since the mid-1970s, the Commission has been a leading innovator. For instance, in response to years of drought, the Energy Commission established energy efficiency standards for water appliances, saving Californians more than 100 billion gallons of water a year. The Commission is working hard to make homes more efficient. Our 2016 building standards are projected to reduce energy consumption by 28% in residential buildings and 5% in non-residential buildings compared to the standards we adopted just 3 years ago. In addition, the Commission must implement building and appliance regulations to put California on the path to near zero net energy for new residential buildings by 2020 and new commercial buildings by 2030. That's a tough challenge. We also established the nation's leading lighting standards. 22% of home electricity used is attributable to lighting. With new efficient lighting, Californians will save billions of dollars and the energy equivalent of turning off one power plant. More recently, the California Energy Commission adopted first-in-the-nation energy efficiency standards for computers and monitors with support from industry, environmentalists, consumer groups, and utilities. These computer standards will ultimately reduce energy usage and save Californians an estimated $370 million a year. California continues to work diligently to determine the next steps needed to combat climate change. We have made great advancements with renewable energy, and by 2030, aim to provide 50% of the state's electricity from renewable sources. Currently, 27% of electricity delivered to customers in California comes from renewable sources. The Commission is developing and deploying alternative and renewable fuels and advanced transportation technologies to help meet the state's goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and petroleum dependence in the transportation sector. Our innovation goes beyond technology. The Energy Commission has a policy to provide equal opportunities for all Californians to participate in and benefit from Commission programs. The Energy Commission continues to expand our outreach to encourage a diverse pool of candidates for our grant programs and to ensure all Californians have a chance to apply for career opportunities. The smart ideas and innovations supported by the Energy Commission directly benefit California. And we are providing the world a roadmap on how to grow the economy while reducing carbon emissions and improving air quality. We welcome more bright minds to help shape the energy future.
Here with me is Judith Ikle, one of our branch managers in our energy division here at the PUC.
Good evening and afternoon. In 1998, I left an analyst position at U.S. EPA headquarters in the Office of Policy Planning and Evaluation, Climate Change Division in Washington, D.C., to join the Public Utilities Commission staff in San Francisco as a Public Utilities Regulatory Analyst. I was attracted to the Public Utilities Commission because at that time, the federal government was a bit stalled in the needed Senate ratification of the newly negotiated Kyoto Protocol to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. In California, the state was implementing energy market restructuring and opening the opportunity for consumers to choose green energy and their electricity provider. My time working for the state has always been challenging and rewarding. Over the past 2 decades, the Energy Division has doubled in size, and we have initiated programs such as the California Solar Initiative, our Renewable Portfolio Standard. I've overseen procurement of new energy resources, such as energy storage, and examined and improved the safety of our aging infrastructure, as well as increased our ratepayer-funded research and development activities. Californians are on the front lines of some of the impacts of climate change, including our most disadvantaged communities, and we are proud to be pioneers in addressing the challenges before us. The CPUC serves the public interest by protecting consumers and ensuring safe, reliable utility service and infrastructure at reasonable rates, with a commitment to environmental enhancement and a healthy California economy. By regulating private investor-owned utility services in the energy, water, communications, and transportation industries, we are able to ensure that the utilities charge fair and reasonable rates, provide service to everyone without discrimination, serve the public interest in reliability, safety, and public health, and enable state policies by guiding the utilities' investments in sustainable programs to reach state emissions reduction targets. The CPUC regulates key industries for our economy and the environment. In the area of energy at the Commission, we conduct formal utility rate cases for some of the largest electric utilities in the nation. We ensure safety and reliability, support customer programs such as discounts for low-income ratepayers, and weigh in on federal and state policy, as well as oversee statewide integrated resource planning and energy procurement, and evaluation of environmental impact of certain large utility projects. In the area of water, which is even more critical than electricity for our population, we are looking at ways to incentivize California ratepayers to become better water users. Rate cases for investor-owned private water utilities help ensure adequate rates to support water quality and pipeline safety, support customer programs such as special rates during droughts and for low-income ratepayer programs, monitor federal and state policy, especially related to water management, and the water energy nexus. For communications, we support emergency service access, including 911 and also 211, and oversee the licensing of communications carriers and provide grants for broadband access for all Californians. In the transportation area, we conduct inspections and audits to support rail safety. We also regulate some passenger carriers, including Lyft. As demand on the utility grid increases, utility infrastructure deteriorates, energy efficiency expectations are set, and public safety concerns grow, existing programs have grown in complexity, and new programs have been created at the CPUC. New technologies and programs that surround the infrastructure of utilities and an increased reliance on renewable energy have driven many programs, such as the expansion of the Energy Division over the last 2 decades, and also driven us to develop new divisions, such as the Utility Cybersecurity Division, to identify and mitigate threats to the utility grid. New technologies must be researched, regulated, and managed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while also maintaining fair and reasonable utility rates for consumers. The PUC consists of 12 divisions that support the Public Utilities Commission's core principles, including administrative services, which is key to helping us manage our grants correctly, manage contracts correctly, hire wonderful people such as you who are watching tonight. The Administrative Law Judge Division consists of judges that play a key role in running rate-making, policy, and complaint proceedings at the CPUC and ensuring fair, unbiased, and well-reasoned decisions. Not all of our judges are lawyers. Some are technical experts that have been trained to serve as judges. The Energy Division advises the Commission regarding the approval, denial, or modifications of all electric and natural gas utility requests. On a typical day, I may deal with an application for over $1 billion of transportation electrification infrastructure, work on reducing the risk of future wildfires through bioenergy projects that use wood from the bark beetle infestation that we've had here in California, support increased deployment of renewable energy to reach our state goal of 50% renewable energy. The legal division is also key to our functioning as we are a regulatory agency, an economic regulatory agency. The many issues and cases the Commission's lawyers handle include energy procurement, electricity and natural gas distribution, market manipulation cases at FERC, and transmission, enforcement, safety, telecommunications, transportation, and water. The Safety and Enforcement Division is our largest division, which ensures that transportation providers and public utilities operate safely, legally, and in the public's interest. The Safety and Enforcement Division monitors and enforces operation, maintenance, and performance standards for electric power plants to ensure safe and reliable electric service. Applicants expressing an interest in safety investigation or data analysis for patterns that lead to improvements of how the utilities operate. For those applicants, this division offers many opportunities. In these various divisions, we are seeking more than 250 new colleagues in the coming year that would like to work in the public interest on the leading edge of policy innovation, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas reduction, with backgrounds in a variety of areas such as engineering, customer service, rail and transportation, environmental technology, operations and policy analysis, administrative law, consumer advocacy, including for our Office of Ratepayer Advocates that advocates in our proceedings on behalf of ratepayer interests, tax and policy development, and safety and risk assessment. The California Public Utilities headquarters is in the heart of San Francisco's Civic Center. The Public Utilities Commission also has regional offices in downtown Sacramento and Los Angeles. Many of these positions can be held in any of these locations. For more information on career opportunities at the CPUC, we encourage you to visit www.cpucjobs.org. Next, I'd like to introduce Edie Chang, Deputy Executive Officer of the California Air Resources Board.
So I'm Edie Chang, and I want to thank you all for being here with us to learn a little bit more about what we do in California on both the energy and the air quality side. As Chair Nichols mentioned in her opening remarks, ARB is having our 50th anniversary this year. So in 1967, on August 30th, Governor at the time, Ronald Reagan, signed legislation that created the Air Resources Board. Since 1967, we've had a very, very successful track record. You heard Chair Nichols talk about some of our successes in terms of cleaning up cars and reducing toxics exposure in California. I grew up in Southern California, east of Los Angeles and Riverside, sort of the area where all the smog in Los Angeles blows. And I can tell you from growing up there in the 70s, I can personally attest to the importance of the programs at the Air Resources Board and also the success of those programs. We see a lot more blue skies in Riverside these days than we did when I was a kid. We are primarily a regulatory agency. The basis of our programs is really regulation. Those regulations are supported by strong science and, as Chair Nichols mentioned, a very strong public process. So we take great pride in the engagement that we have with the public. We have a very, very knowledgeable stakeholder base, and we take advantage of that. They're very, very involved in our rulemaking. Our programs have evolved over time. Our first mandate was really addressing the smog problem, the ozone problem, and trying to meet the national ambient air quality standards that are set by US EPA. Most areas of the state are now attainment, but our most populated areas are still non-attainment for ozone and fine particulate matter. In the 80s, the late 80s, our programs expanded to include air toxics. There was toxics legislation passed in California, and ARB began implementing that legislation. That was eventually the basis of Title III of the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, and so these really became a nationwide program at that point. In 2006, legislation was passed in California to establish a comprehensive greenhouse gas program. So you may have heard of AB 32. AB 32 designated the Air Resources Board as the agency that was in charge of pulling together a comprehensive climate plan for California. And this really has changed the way that we are regulating in California, our goals in California, and a lot of the programs that we talk about, including 50% renewables, our low carbon fuel standards, are driving towards these reductions in greenhouse gases. In the last legislative session, there was additional legislation passed that focuses on air quality in neighborhoods. And this is a really big switch for our programs, going from regions and global pollutants to looking at neighborhoods. And so we are gearing up an entirely new program looking at how we monitor air quality and can reduce emissions in neighborhoods where people work and live and play. Some of the programs that we've implemented, you may have heard of some of them. The cap and trade regulation for greenhouse gases is one of the most prominent programs that gets a lot of press attention these days. California standards for greenhouse gas emissions, which eventually became the basis for federal standards for greenhouse gases, our low carbon fuel standards, new standards for trucks, and also in-use standards for trucks as well. So there's a lot of different programs that are going on in California. Why don't we go to the next slide? So this is really sort of how do we meet these goals? What's the structure that we work within? California is, the Air Resources Board is the state agency designated under the Clean Air Act to submit information to the federal government. We are the only state in the U.S. that is allowed to set our own car and truck standards because our programs predate those of the federal government. U.S. EPA has primary authority over interstate sources like trains, planes, and ships. But because the air pollution is so bad in California, we've had to try to find ways to reduce emissions from those sources, even though we don't have primary regulatory authority. So we've worked on more in-use approaches like regulating the fuels these kinds of sources use or regulating how they operate when they are in our ports and rail yards. So we're forcing these kinds of equipment to become cleaner through programs that the state is operating. In California, local air districts are the primary sources or the primary regulatory agencies for stationary sources, factories, refineries, power plants. We have oversight over the local air districts. The local air districts are independent county or regional organizations. We work very, very closely with the air districts, but they are independent organizations. So who are we looking for to work at the Air Resources Board? We are primarily an organization of scientists and engineers. We also employ economists, lawyers, policy analysts, IT professionals, and administrative professionals in our budget shop, our HR shop. We have about 1,400 staff that are located in Northern and Southern California. Our Northern California office is in Sacramento. Our Southern California office is currently in the Los Angeles area, El Monte, California. We are in the process of building a new laboratory to test mobile source emissions in Riverside. That's my hometown, and it has nothing to do with how we pick Riverside. But we are building a new mobile source laboratory, and we're really excited about the opportunity to have expanded capability to test emerging technologies as well as make sure that cars that are already on the road stay clean. We are seeking staff at all levels of the organization, from entry-level staff to folks that have more experience with management. As I mentioned, we're gearing up some new programs right now, and so there are opportunities to come in and work on air quality or greenhouse gases, whether it's something that's very in the weeds like our inventory or our monitoring and lab division, or something that is a little broader, looking at things like transportation planning or air quality planning. At the Air Resources Board, what we really value are folks that are technically sound, curious, motivated, mission-driven, and really team players. And I can't emphasize that enough. You see the three agencies here today. We work together not only on this recruiting session, but in our day-to-day work. We spend a lot of time with the agencies that are here as well as other state agencies, and it's a really important aspect of our work to work well in teams. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Drew from the Energy Commission.
Thank you, Edie, and thank you again to everybody who is tuning in and taking time out of your day to give California a look. It's a great state. My name is Drew Bowen. I'm Chief Deputy Director of the California Energy Commission, and we are based in Sacramento. Sacramento is a really nice city to live in. We've got two major rivers that run through the city. The American River has a 26-mile-long county park that runs along either side of it. We're about an hour and a half from some of the most spectacular mountains in the world, and an hour and a half from San Francisco, and beaches all up and down our coast. So just from that perspective, it's a nice place to live and raise a family, or just live. We have a lot of people at the California Energy Commission. I'll ask to switch to the next slide. We have a lot of our staff who wake up every day feeling like they're going to do something bigger than themselves. And that's really the promise I think all three of our agencies offer. We are, as our chairman, if you were listening at the beginning of the program, noted, really changing the world. And it may sound a little highfalutin or a little bit of an exaggeration, but I want to run through some of our goals and let you decide whether you think we're indeed making a significant change in California, and by doing so beyond California's borders. Finally, I'd just say as an overview piece that you may have heard the old expression, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. We have a lot of people at the Energy Commission who really do love their jobs, and I think it stems a lot from what I want to discuss that's on the screen before you, which is our goals. If you would have said 20 years ago that California is going to achieve 50% renewable generation by 2030, I think you'd have had a lot of people laugh at the idea. In fact, we're well over halfway there today. We're nearly at 30%. That figure does not include large hydro, which we don't in California define as renewable, but it is certainly carbon-free, and it makes up, depending on the year, how much rain we get, on average approximately 15% of our generation. So if you add that together, we're almost at 50% carbon-free today, and we're making strides every day to increase that. That's an area where you can work at the California Energy Commission and at the PUC and at the ARB. They have roles in that as well. Our role in renewables is to certify renewable resources. So if you want to produce electricity and call it renewable, you have to meet certain standards. We evaluate those claims and then determine which facilities are eligible for the program. We also then look at the procurement by the utilities to make sure that they're meeting their obligations. We verify the procurement that they're acquiring, and again, make sure that it meets the standards that the statute sets forth. Second bullet is about energy efficiency. We in California are world leaders in energy efficiency, both in appliances and in buildings. Chair Weisenmiller, again at the beginning of the program, referred to computers. We adopted last year a standard for computers that requires manufacturers to redesign their devices in a very modest way to make them more energy efficient. The law requires that any change we, through regulation, impose on manufacturers be cost effective. And what that means is that during the life of the product, in this case computers, and I believe we scored them as being lasting 4 or 5 years, you as a consumer have to save more money on your energy bills in that 4 to 5 year period that you own the device through energy savings than it costs as an initial cost to purchase that device. So manufacturers often have to spend a few more dollars to upgrade the device, but we require that then our rules extract at least that much out in energy savings during the life of the device. And we've got lots and lots of different products over the years and are working on more now that do that. And the added benefit, and back to the changing the world, rather bold claim, with appliances in particular, manufacturers often, when required to meet our standards to be able to sell into a market of nearly 40 million Californians, will change their devices not only for California, but for their entire product line throughout the United States and even across the world. So our standards have an impact that goes way beyond our borders more often than not. The other point that the chair made was that just that one standard, just for computers, a little device in your computer, when full turnover occurs in a couple of years of the computers that are out there, will save annually the equivalent of about a modest-sized city's entire energy consumption. So this isn't trivial, and this is just from California consumption, not the added benefit of throughout the rest of the country and throughout the world. Next bullet looks at zero-emission vehicles. Air Board and Energy Commission both work on various aspects of the goal of zero-emission vehicles by 2025. We're looking to have 1.5 million of them, and we're well on our way. We're already over 300,000, and it's only 2017, so we're making great strides there. We need a lot of help, and folks listening to this conversation could really help us a lot in all these areas, including zero-emission vehicles. Next bullet is about planning and forecasting, and I want to move along here a little bit. We do a lot of planning that enables the utilities and others to look into the future and make projections as to what we need to build and what the Public Utilities Commission needs to approve in terms of new resources. And finally, on research, we invest $150 million a year in ratepayer funds in energy research and development to try to improve the way we do all things energy. Next slide, please. So you've heard from the others. I won't go into this slide in any detail, but we really do need scientists, engineers, lawyers, policy folks throughout California. And you'll hear from others today about the process, but if you go onto our website, it's a very straightforward two-step process to try to submit an application to California. You have to take a test, and most of our tests are very straightforward, essentially recitations of your resume. We ask how many years of experience you have in X discipline and how many years you've worked on Y activities, and you press enter when you're done, and you immediately get a result, and you find out where you land in terms of your score on the test. And then you can send in a resume and apply just like you would in any other environment. But we do have that two-step process. Next slide, please. We've got 700 staff. We're all here in Sacramento, and we have about over 100 openings. We say for scientists and engineers, it isn't just that. It's for other disciplines as well. We hope you will give us a look and consider working in Sacramento. And at this point, I'd like to pass it along to Tiffany, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the benefits of working for the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you all once again for joining us. So you might wonder why you should come to California. Well, Drew talked a little bit about the great state that we live in, and I can tell you the weather is awesome. You can't beat it anywhere, especially in the wintertime. I know you guys are used to that snow. You can get snow, but you don't have to live in it constantly. So California is a great place to be. Some of the benefits for working for the state: we have excellent health, dental, and vision care choices, and the state will pay a portion of your premium depending on the employee group that you belong to. We have holidays, paid time off. I can tell you, you will be the envy of your non-state working friends for all of the holidays that we get off that most people don't. So you will definitely enjoy that. There are a wide variety of career paths and job mobility that you can keep your benefits and leave accruals when you transfer or promote from one state to another. There are also flexible schedules and teleworking opportunities. You're not required in a lot of cases to work an 8 to 5 shift. Depending upon the position you have, of course, in the department that you work for, there are lots of different variable work schedules that you can work. The state is also very adamant about people continuously learning and gaining skills, and so they provide lots of training opportunities for you, not just in the position that you start out with, but also for promotion opportunities and just general development. The employment is also very stable, and even in those times where there are layoffs, when layoffs are necessary, the state does have processes in place to help mitigate the impact to the state employee. And also, there is additional compensation available in some positions. Depending on the position that you have, you could be eligible for additional pay based on the specific job-related criteria. So you just would have to, depending on the position in the department that you apply for, look into those options. Next slide, please. So the state of California offers its employees a pension program through CalPERS, which is the California Public Employees Retirement System. That's sort of different from a lot of other private agencies. The state enjoys a pension as well, which is based on their years of service. But in addition to that, they also have a supplemental retirement plan that they can participate in, which is a 401k and a 457 plan, which through the state is called the Savings Plus plan. And with that program, you can elect to, participate up to a certain maximum throughout the year as set by the IRS, which would be separate from what your pension allows for. And you can add, increase, decrease, choose your investment. So it's really flexible, and it's another great benefit that state employees enjoy. Once again, in addition to their pension, and also state employees, for the most part, participate in Social Security, so they pay into Social Security. So with those three options, you can build a really nice retirement for yourself by working for the state of California. Also, the transferability of previous employer plans. If you have a defined contribution plan from another employer, you can transfer that over to the state's plan and continue to build for your retirement. So also, there could be relocation reimbursement. So some departments may offer reimbursement of relocation expenses, including your mileage, your moving expenses, and up to 30 days of temporary lodging and meals. Of course, that is going to be to the department's discretion, and also depending on what position you apply for. But that is something that you can discuss with those specific departments. Next slide. So you may be wondering, okay, with all those awesome benefits, how do you begin your career with the state? So you can, Drew touched on this a bit. If you go to jobs.ca.gov, there's many career opportunities throughout the state of California that you can apply for. And there is a process, so there are 3 steps to obtaining a career. So the first step is to search for a job. And you can do that by going to the icon for New to State Service on the jobs.ca.gov homepage, where you can browse for career fields and see the jobs that are available. You can also do a more detailed search by keyword, by job title or state department, or even location, work schedule, and salary. So once you find the job that you want, of course, that department needs to learn more about you, and so you can take an assessment. They will evaluate your education, experience, abilities, and knowledge through that assessment. And that can take many forms. You can take an exam, and then there's also an interview process. And there is a difference between an assessment and an exam. So some departments require you to take an assessment, which again is just, evaluating your experience and abilities. And then there may be an actual exam that you have to take, which, it's part of, trying to evaluate what you know. It could be math. It could be, comprehension. It could be a lot of things. But there is, a little bit of a difference between an assessment and an exam. You want to read the job bulletin to see what the qualifications are that are needed. And the job bulletin will also explain what the job is like, what the salary range is, and give you an overview of the assessment process. And so if you're interested and you're qualified, then you begin the assessment, and if you pass, then you're able to start applying for jobs. And then the third step is to apply for those jobs. And you only need to fill out 1 job application, and you can use that same application to apply for multiple positions. Or you can create 2 or 3 applications and tailor them to the different jobs. And you can also upload your attachments like your resume and writing samples so that you can submit those to the different departments and the different jobs that you're applying for. And then, of course, if those departments like what they see and see that you're the right person for the job, they'll call you for an interview. And then you can participate in a hiring interview. And it's really that easy. So I will go ahead and forward it over to Candace Hyatt to talk to you about resources.
The CPUC, CARB, and CEC have a variety of positions open in various divisions, departments, and branches. We strongly encourage you to utilize these resources to explore the many career opportunities. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the agencies at the information listed in this slide. This information will be distributed with other resources shortly after this presentation. I'd like to invite Edie Chang back to moderate the Q&A session. There will be no slide presentation. If you'd like to expand the size of the video stream, you can do so by selecting the Maximize button in the upper right-hand corner of the video screen.
Okay, thank you, Candace. So for as we kick off the Q&A session, I want to say that we received some questions in advance, and so we've tried to incorporate those questions into the presentations as we've gone through. We've also, the questions that we've received in advance, we've tried to roll them up a little bit, and so try to make them, sometimes if they were a little bit specific, we tried to make them a little bit more generic so they would apply to more folks. We are going to get through as many live questions as we can today. If your question is not answered, never fear. We're going to be preparing a Q&A of all questions that we received, and we'll be posting that information. So if you're not taking good notes and you want to just refer to that Q&A later, or if your question wasn't answered, we'll answer it in writing. One of the questions that I'm going to answer straight up is, will we get the presentation slides after the webinar? And the answer is yes, you will get the slides. We will be emailing the slides to folks that are registered for the webinar, and then we'll also be posting the slides in a place that will be easy to find. So I'm going to start with some of the questions that we had received in advance. So the first one is, the announcement for this webinar indicated that the state was recruiting federal workers. What about former federal workers and other candidates? Judith?
Okay. So we find that federal workers, being an ex-federal worker, have excellent skills that help out in a state job, but we are interested in all sorts of applicants. We have excellent people who come straight from university. We have entrepreneurs who come to us. We have attorneys, and we also have people who are clerks who may come straight from high school. So basically we are hiring from all different backgrounds, and please don't let federal, the federal focus of some of the recruiting dissuade you from applying. Most of our employees do not have any federal background or any other government background.
Well, Judith, can you talk a little bit, you talked in your opening about working at US EPA and then switching to work to the PUC. Can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits you found in making that switch?
Yeah, so I think that one of the main benefits is that at the state level, with a state as large as California, with an economy which is sixth in the world, maybe.
So we're fifth.
We're fifth or sixth. Depending on the French. Yeah. Huge economy. To be at an economic regulatory agency, you can really make a difference. So I think coming from the federal government, I was part of a much larger bureaucracy, and it was not as easy to get things done. In the case of working at the Public Utilities Commission, we launched a number of programs like the California Solar Initiative, which basically transformed the solar market with a handful of people, a judge, an assigned commissioner, and that was a $3 billion program. So I think it really is that at the state level you can really have more impact than at the federal level, especially maybe at this point.
Okay. This next question, Drew, I'm going to warn you, it's going to you. Are there opportunities to train in new fields?
Yeah, absolutely. We have an excellent training program at the Energy Commission. I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves, but having heard from them before, I know they also have very good training programs. We have everything from, Word and Excel training at the sort of simplistic level all the way up to college level training and really everything in between. We're very, very supportive of folks trying to improve themselves to achieve their career goals. So we're very open to training. We also have at the Energy Commission a management training program that we crafted with the University of California at Davis, just down the road from us here, and we ask all of our managers to go through that training. So I think we've really got quite a breadth and depth of training opportunities.
And I would chime in by saying, there are sort of the normal training opportunities at the Air Board. there are some things that we do that really you can't take classes in. They're sort of learn-on-the-job things. It's hard to take classes on how do you write a regulation or how do you effectively implement a regulation. So there's also a lot of on-the-job training. We really encourage people to move around within the organization, to see the organization from different perspectives, and part of what comes with that is recognizing that we're going to be bringing people up to speed on new tasks. We also have tuition assistance programs for sort of more formal academic training.
And we've had a big focus on training in the energy division because we've grown so much and because we have so many new areas that we need to learn about. Some of the technologies are new and the problems that we're encountering in terms of the electricity grid are new. So we have a lot of very specialized training. We also generally have training on rate making, which is probably something you didn't learn in another venue. We also have very rigorous training for our pipeline safety inspectors. They go through a rigorous training out of state, and also our railroad safety inspectors have a very specialized training. We also do, training in, we have a new modeling group and learning about, programming in Python and using Tableau. Presenting data is a big focus of our work right now.
Okay. Are you looking for full-time, part-time, or independent contractor positions?
So generally at the PUC, we're looking for full-time positions. As Tiffany said, there is flexibility in terms of work schedule. We have a 980 schedule, much like the federal government has, where you over 2 weeks get 1 day off and work 9 hours on some of the other days. But generally, we're looking more towards full-time positions with this recruitment effort.
True.
Full-time.
Yeah, and I would say the Air Resources Board, we're in pretty much the same spot. Every once in a while, we do have positions that come up and that are advertised as part-time positions, but that's a little bit more rare. The next question, are there opportunities to work remotely from the DC area? So for the Air Resources Board, although there are opportunities for telecommuting on a permanent basis from out of state, and especially as far away as DC, is probably not viable. I would say that it would be in a very, very rare situation where we would allow something like that. Our telecommute is sometimes related to folks who need to travel, or folks that are just sort of staying home to focus on something on some particular day. A lot of our work, it's really important to be in the office and be able to interact with folks, and so we're sort of trying to balance the benefits of telecommuting with also the need to be able to interact with your, the other folks on the team at the ARB.
I would just add, I agree 100% with what Edie just said, but I would say we could entertain a transition period. Let's say somebody wanted to move out, they had kids in school, or some other, sick relative or something had a reason why they needed a little bit of time but wanted to start. We could entertain that, but a long-term arrangement where we would have staff working from DC is not something we would entertain.
And I
agree. Okay. In which area of California are most of the jobs located? And I think we covered this mostly in the presentation. We have offices in Sacramento, and then in the Los Angeles area.
And we have offices in Sacramento, and we have one office which is slightly outside Sacramento, and then we have an office in downtown Los Angeles, and our headquarters is in San Francisco, downtown also.
This next question is for CalHR. What is the normal timeline for hiring?
It really depends on the department, but, because you have to go through the, announcement of the job process and selecting those who are qualified to interview, and then, going through the interview process. So it could, take anywhere from maybe 30 to 90 days. It really will depend on the department and the position that they're applying for.
And I would just add that some of our lists require that you take the exam ahead of time, and they're not given every day. So sometimes it's good to just go ahead and look what sort of opportunities are out there and get on lists for positions that you might want to be ready to apply for should they become available.
Right.
And I don't want to make a promise we can't keep, but we tend to post jobs for a defined period, so maybe we'll leave it open for 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that. It's not inconceivable you could look at our site, find an open position, and the period to apply closes, let's say at the end of this week. You could take the test if it's the right, we call them all exams, but I think Tiffany made a good point that our exams are really more assessments mostly, where again, you're just populating something that lets us know what sort of background you've got. But it's conceivable you can go on and get an instantaneous result, turn around, apply by the end of this week, and we could be conducting interviews next week and making offers by the end of next week or the following. So that's uncommon, but I just want to make it sound like it's always a long, protracted process.
Yeah, I just kind of want to tie up some ends that you heard. You heard the term beyond a list. That refers to your eligibility to be appointed to a job. So there's the assessment/examination process whereby you would gain eligibility for an appointment. And then there's the jobs that we're talking about that you see posted that you would also want to apply for. And I think one of the takeaways is if you see a job that's being advertised, apply for it while either already having or going to obtain list eligibility. So that would mean taking the assessment or exam to ensure that you can be eligible to be hired.
Okay. We've received a couple questions about, I'm going to group them into sort of licensing. One was about professional engineers. Do you need a professional engineer license to work for these agencies? And then also a question about attorneys. Do you need to be admitted to practice in California? You want to start?
So in order to be in the classification of a public utilities council, which is the classic attorney's position, yes, you do need to have passed the California bar. However, we have lower level legal positions which do not require that you pass the California bar. And actually, as I said, some of our judges are not attorneys, and so you would not need to pass the bar to be an attorney. And we use attorneys, having excellent writing skills and being able to analyze laws is a critical skill for our agency. So we do employ people who are trained attorneys but have not passed the bar yet in a variety of positions. For engineers, our main classification is the utility engineer classification. To be a utility engineer, you do not need to have a PE license. However, to get to the highest rank of utility engineer, which is the D class versus the A class, B class, or C class, you do need to have a PE license.
And I think it's the same for our agency, for the lawyers and for the engineers.
We have engineer positions that do not require a PE. Many of mechanical engineer, electrical engineer positions.
Okay, for CalHR, are there any sample tests or basic guidelines available before someone takes an exam?
Possibly.
It depends.
It does depend. It depends on the position. There are some entry-level positions that I've seen on the job bulletin that will apply or that will provide, sample tests that you can use, but don't expect that all of them will. But, the job bulletin, based on the requirements for the job will give you a good idea of whether or not you will qualify for it and sort of help you to prepare. But there are a few, but not all of them will have a sample test.
And I think we might all want to speak a little bit to our specific situation. At the Air Resources Board, the bulk of our technical staff are in two classifications. One is the air pollution specialist, and the other is the air resources engineer. So both of those assessments are done online, and it's based on sort of your familiarity with different topics. So, once you start it, I shouldn't say that, whether you can actually look at it before you take it. But it is important, and this was a question that came up about whether you can take an exam multiple times. For our exams, you're allowed to take the exam once every 12 months. And so you should, when you sit down and take the exam, you want to take it seriously because you're not going to be able to take it again for 12 months. And the score that you get, that's the score that you're going to have for 12 months. but they really are sort of more assessments of what your knowledge is, as opposed to I'm going to have to do math or solve problems on this assessment.
A really great resource when you go to take the assessment or exam, you will typically see a link to what's referred to as a classification specification. It's a document that you can then open up and read, and it gives you a general description of the classification that you're taking the assessment or examination for. And in that document is a listing of not only the minimum qualifications, but also the prerequisite knowledge, skills, and abilities that are being assessed. And that can be a really useful tool to provide insights into what will be covered.
I would just add, I'm actually sending a note to someone to try to get a more specific answer. I'm not sure with one of our main exams or one of our main entry-level science classification exams whether we share prior tests. I just don't know the answer to that. If I find out, I'll let folks know on this.
Or we can add it to the written Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I said earlier, most of our tests or exams are not even assessments of what you know. They're literally just experience. We call them T&Es, training and experience. So they're just, we want to maximize the number of people that can get in the door, and then allow our managers to draw from the largest pool possible, and then make judgments about whatever the very specific positions are that they have available, what they want to do in the interview process. So some may want to give a writing test or something like that, although that's not very common, but during the interview. But we leave that to our managers, so that the getting in the door part, the getting on the list you've heard us refer to, we're striving to make that as simple as possible. Now, you self-certify, and there's a rule in the state that if you self-certify inaccurately, you run the risk that you can't apply again for a state job. So that's the mechanism that regulates folks being faithful with what they report on the assessment.
Okay. So, question for everybody. I have a background in data analysis. What division or agency would be a good fit for me?
Can I take that?
Sure.
I just had a conversation before I walked over here with one of my bosses about this very subject. and we have an entire 80 to 90 person division that just focuses, we call it the Energy Assessments Division, that just focuses on this question. It's all sorts of different energy data, from natural gas to electricity to lots of subunits within that, renewables versus gas-fired power plants versus other types of electricity. This is a major part of what the Energy Commission does. So we are a terrific home for somebody with that sort of interest, and we hope you'll look us up.
And we are a terrific home for that sort of skill as well. We have a new modeling section which is looking at energy issues. We have something called pop-ups for learning, which is an internal training that we have, and we have one coming up this week where folks in our communications division who deal with mapping broadband and broadband access are going to talk about some of the work that they do. We also have some folks in the railroad safety area that are using GIS to map some of the railroad infrastructure, and of course pipelines as well. So we definitely are focusing a lot on data, and as I said as well, we have a new cyber security division as well. So.
And I'm going to chime in too. I think that all of our agencies deal with a lot of data, and it really sort of depends on what kind of data you're both interested in, how, and I think this is part of it, how do you want that analysis to be used? We obviously deal with air quality data and also emissions data in the very fine. For example, I mentioned we have a laboratory in Southern California, so they run emissions tests of vehicles. Our laboratory in Southern California is the one that basically broke the VW case. So that was, analyzing reams of data, trying to figure out what was going on for over a year while VW was giving us the runaround. So that's a very, specific example of data analysis. Part of that is also, of course, understanding what the vehicles are supposed to be doing and how the program works, but also, more generic emissions data from, whether they're from stationary sources, aggregated data that we get from air districts, as well as air quality data. So I think if you're a good data analyst, quite honestly, we would all be fighting over you, so definitely apply. Okay, what is the window for this hiring push? So we're working on this recruiting session. What's the window for this hiring push, and will you still be hiring in a year? And since I'm talking, I'm going to start, and I'm going to say absolutely we're still going to be hiring in a year. We have 1,400 staff. And so there's always sort of just a natural turnover in our programs, and so there are always going to be opportunities. But we are at a phase right now, at least for us, the way the California budget runs is we receive our budget appropriations in July, and what that means is if we get new positions or if we're standing up new programs, we get those positions in the summer. And so we're in that place right now where we've got some new positions. We're starting up this new neighborhood-based air quality program. So we're going to start seeing a lot of opportunities at the airport right now.
And we're on the same schedule in that we did get a number of new positions in July, as we did last year as well. And also we have a lot of opportunities for promotion in our organization. So as I said, we actually have 250 open positions in our agency right now, which we're going to work on filling this year, and we expect that there will be some attrition and also perhaps some new positions in the coming year as well.
Same, very well put.
Okay. Are there positions available for folks that don't have a science degree?
Yes. Yes.
You guys want to elaborate any?
Well, I'll just point out the entry-level, the main entry-level position at the Energy Commission is what we call the energy analyst position. It's one of the exceptions to what I've been saying repeatedly, which is our exams are based on just what your resume says. This one is an actual proctored exam, our entry-level exam. However, as you move up the progression of promotions within this line of energy positions that we have that do all manner of different work, but it's all energy-related work, you don't need to have, first of all, you don't have to take that type of an exam. It becomes your resume. And the requirements for education become just a four-year degree typically.
So at the California Public Utilities Commission, we're an economic regulatory agency. So actually most of our staff has a economics background, public policy background. We love it if people know about tax policy, finance. We have auditor positions as well. And we have a lot of attorneys, and we need a lot of IT people. We have a lot of IT work as well. So if you look at our general analyst position, if you have kind of a background in statistics and public policy, in environmental studies, in economics, political science, that's an excellent background for working at the Public Utilities Commission. And really a orientation towards consumer advocacy. I mean, we do have a very important role in safeguarding consumer rights in our proceedings.
So as I mentioned earlier, ARB's two main technical classifications are the air pollution scientist and the air resources engineer. So the bulk of our staff have science degrees. There are also opportunities in our IT shop. I think that IT becomes an important aspect of all of our programs because that's how we interact with the public and the regulated community these days. We also have an administrative shop, which is more sort of our budget folks, our accountants, and folks like that. So we might be a little bit narrower than some of the other agencies.
You know, Edie, I'd just like to add, we similarly have a lot of scientists and engineers in our organization, but I'll tell you what, I'd rather have a music major that's passionate about doing the kind of work we do, that is a hard worker, and that, as Edie alluded to earlier, is a team player, than I would somebody with a science background who's ambivalent about the sort of work we do and, you know, doesn't have those other sort of difficult to measure qualities. So again, in our very entry-level position, the degrees, there's a list of degrees you have to get in, but once you move up the ladder, we take people in as laterals that don't have to have those same sorts of degrees.
Okay. Is there a lot of interagency activity? If folks come to work for any of our agencies, you know, do you get to work with other agencies?
So just like in the federal government where I work with a variety of federal agencies. In the state government, I also work with a variety of agencies. I think there was a particular question about DWR and the Water Resources Agency, and I used to have weekly calls with the Water Agency during the drought because hydroelectric supply was a big concern. And then one day there was a flood call after our drought call because we got a lot of rain this year. So we work very closely with ARB. They have been working on a big scoping plan, which we've been weighing into, and we work very closely with the CEC. We have a very large $800 million R&D program, which is administered in part by the CEC that we oversee. So, yeah.
Edie and I were at a meeting earlier today, and it's not uncommon. Our staffs work together at the PUC and the ARB and the CEC all the time, and so I think it's a very collegial relationship. And we also have staff that move around. Sometimes we lose folks to my colleagues, and we sometimes get new staff that have gotten the benefit of training at their agencies. So.
And I think that's one of the things that CalHR mentioned. One of the benefits of working for the state is you can move around and you retain your benefits when you move. So, as a employee, I think that's a really powerful place to be because you can, sort of look and see what's the new interesting thing and pursue that and still maintain your benefits. So, let me go here. What percentage, this is for CalHR, what percentage of positions require an exam?
I don't know that exactly, but what I do know is that a good majority of positions nowadays are moving towards, instead of an exam, the assessment process. So fewer and fewer are actually requiring an exam and are more going into the assessment-focused way of evaluating a qualified employee.
I just want to address that question. Technically, all positions require an exam per se, and so it's really, as we talk about an assessment because we really want to demystify this notion of a traditional academic exam, and that's why we talk about a T&E, a training and experience assessment. All appointments, because the state, we are a merit-based civil service hiring entity, you have to compete, and that's why you come off of a list. And so for your initial appointment into the state, you will have to come off of a list where you take this assessment or exam to be appointed off of. Once you are in the state system, you can, with some limitations, transfer from position to position, classification to classification. But we start to get into real technical type issues of how to maneuver the state. But it's really going to depend on your specific eligibility and your status with the state.
Well, and I think, Candace, what you're really saying is the two-step process that you described, where you need to be on some sort of list by taking a test or an assessment and then apply for jobs, that process applies for pretty much every job in the state. And so whether, even, I'm going to use myself as an example, even in executive level positions, they do a exam, and it may be, a different kind of exam, but they do an exam and then they do a job interview. So virtually every position requires that two-step process. So,
Correct.
Okay. Also for CalHR, what impacts the salary range that you qualify for, and is it negotiable?
Okay, so that also depends on the specific position. There are salary ranges for all different positions, but it will depend on which one you apply for, and so I would say defer to the actual job announcement and the class specifications to determine what that range is. As far as it being negotiable, it may be possible depending on what type of position and what department, maybe so. I haven't had the experience of that, but I think that there are some positions out there that it may be a negotiable thing.
Maybe CalHR can correct me, but my understanding is if you look at any of our job announcements online, they're all the same sort of format. You'll see right near the top a salary range of, $7,000 to $9,000 a month. I believe the rule is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you start out at the bottom of that salary range unless you're able to establish there's a number of exceptions to that. And if you can demonstrate that you fall within one of those exceptions, and one of those is I make more than that now, so therefore I'd like to come in at a comparable salary, again, as long as it's within that range, that's allowable.
That's correct.
Yeah, so each classification has a designated minimum and a maximum, and that's referred to as the salary range. So depending how a job is posted, you'll likely see this range of salaries. Most likely you will be assigned to the minimum based on regulations that govern salary determination and your starting salary. Some classifications, there are ranges within that salary range where if you, for example, are in an engineer classification and have a license, you might be awarded at the higher end of that salary range based on specific criteria that's designed. So it really does depend on the classification that you're applying for. There are some other extraordinary situations where it can be negotiable. And so we always encourage, one, if you're interested, get on the list and apply. Do that first. And if you have questions about the salary, contact the agency making the hire and have conversations with them so that they can speak to you in depth about your specific situation and your concerns regarding salary.
Okay. What agency would be most interested in someone with a sustainable engineering degree with a focus in microgrid design? This one is not the Air Resources Board.
We do a lot of this. We have, principally in our research and development division, for those who joined late, I mentioned earlier, we invest about $150 million of ratepayer funds in research and development, and it's in a whole host of different energy-related categories, and one of those includes microgrids. So we will put out solicitations periodically for $10 to $30 million for microgrid designs, and we really need folks to help us figure out what the state of the art is today, figure out what sorts of things we ought to be looking at trying to fund to advance the ball further, and we work very closely with the PUC on these sorts of issues. But we've funded a lot of microgrids and could really use assistance in that area.
So we had a lot of discussion earlier about exams and assessments, and one of the questions is, where do you go to take the exam or assessment? Starting for ARB, ours are available online. So if you go to the resource slide that was shown earlier and you go to the ARB link, there's a jobs link, and the beginning of that page is job opportunities. So here are the jobs that are open right now, and if you keep scrolling down all the way to the bottom of that page, you'll see a place where it says, I think they're called assessments, Air Resources Engineer and Air Pollution Specialist, and you can click on that, you can take it online, and you get your results immediately after you finish. I think everybody's pretty much online now.
Usually it's online, at least if the exam itself isn't online, the application process for the exam is online. Not all of the exam processes or assessment processes are identical. It depends on the classification, but certainly it's CPUC, jobs.ca.gov that you can go to for a complete listing of the vacancies as well as the assessments and examinations.
And how can folks interview if they live out of state? Is that something that folks have handled?
So we have interviewed people via Skype, so that's or via phone is the way that we will do a hiring interview.
Right, and us as well. We've done a variety of different technologies depending on the person and the position and the folks that are hiring. So we can handle that. For CalHR, does the state offer matching for contributions to 401k, and if so, how much?
The state does not offer matching to 401ks, and the reason for that is because they are contributing to your pension, which is your CalPERS. So they are already doing that, and the amount is based on what employee group you belong to, as that determines the percentage and what your percentage in age of retirement rate is. So they do not match for the 401k. That would be a contribution that you would elect to do voluntarily on your own, in addition to what's happening with your CalPERS.
Okay. Is there funding available for continuing education like graduate school? And I'll start because mine's pretty short. The ARB does have tuition assistance programs that are available for the staff.
And we have some limited tuition assistance as well.
We've got a pretty generous program for including graduate school, yes.
Okay. One of the questions, how do you sign up for an exam or an assessment? This is going to be one of those, it depends.
Right.
So I think every one of us, and I think we talked about this a little bit on the last webinar, one of the things that I think is actually confusing about the state process is there are thousands of classifications. And so we use the Air Resources Engineer classification. If you're an engineer and you want to work at the PUC, it's a different classification with a different name, and it's a different exam. And it may look very different than what you do to get onto our list. And so you really need to look at the individual agency that you are interested in position. One of the ways that you might do that to kind of cut through the thousands of classifications is look at the job announcements. So look at the job announcements and which ones are you interested in and what are those classifications. And those are probably the ones that you want to take the exam for. So if you see something at the Energy Commission, wow, there's a lot of really cool jobs and this is the classification, that's probably one that you want to take the exam for. And you want to be, honestly, we tell this to the staff that work for us now, you want to be on as many lists as you can be. You want to maximize your opportunities to apply for jobs. So there isn't a limit on how many lists that you can be on, and it's really to your advantage in terms of your flexibility to be on as many lists as you can.
I think that's really good advice. In our case, again, I think if you go to our job announcements, the link is listed. You'll see many of the jobs that are available now. If you find one that looks interesting, you'll see a little link above it in the couple paragraph narrative that precedes the listing of jobs. And if you click that, again, most of our exams, you literally click it, you populate this form with, what essentially amounts to your resume, how many years of experience you have in various areas, and you press enter, and you are done. It isn't given at a certain time. You can take it whenever you want, middle of the night. It doesn't matter. So it's quite easy to do for most of our jobs. I will say, again, our entry-level position is different. That's a proctored exam. We offer it on a Saturday typically every quarter or so. That one, if you're living outside of California, would obviously be a little bit more burdensome, but the majority of them are not that way. They're simply an online, very simple, straightforward process.
And at the PUC, we have a proctored exam for our utility engineer exam, which is still given on the third Monday of each month in our 3 different offices. So that we have more than 20 positions open for utility engineers right now. The other position that we have many of is the public utility regulatory analyst position, and that is available through an assessment which is online, which you can take any time. Some of our management positions, we just open up the exam quarterly, so you might want to go ahead and follow the advice of applying for as many of the assessments as possible. And I like taking assessments that don't matter to me, just for practice, because, maybe I'm never going to be that thing, but it's nice to just take one where there isn't a risk. That's fine. We also have financial examiners and auditors, so that's another big classification for us.
All right, we have a couple more questions that are scrolling, and I want to make sure that we get to those before we finish here. How do you evaluate candidates over 50? Are they evaluated differently? I'm going to say no, they are not. We can elaborate if you want.
No.
No, being over 50, I hope not. No, we would treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question is a little bit more specific one for the CEC about some of the work you do, and is there work related to speculative alternative renewable energy sources?
There is. Probably mainly in our research and development division, but I think we do white papers periodically in our renewables division. But a lot of our research is on relatively speaking, mature technologies like wind, like solar, like geothermal, and we're looking for ways to build a better mousetrap in those sorts of areas where we're already, made great advances over the last few decades. But we are also looking at those reach technologies. For example, piezoelectric, folks may have heard of. It's where you can run lines on roads, for example, or on railroad tracks and pick up the vibrations from the vehicles moving over them, and then try to convert that into electricity. Right now, it isn't cost effective, but we're looking at it, and solar wasn't cost effective 30 years ago either, and now it's one of the cheapest resources out there. So I guess the short answer is yes.
Okay. We have a few more questions that were sort of some of the rolled up ones from earlier, and so I'm going to go to those. Is there travel involved in the positions that your agencies have?
So that depends on the position. The Public Utilities Commission actually has some safety positions in particular that require a lot of travel because you are either investigating or auditing a utility plant or a railroad accident or something like that. So we have some folks that are traveling a lot of the time. Most of our folks do not travel that much. And it will be in the job opportunity bulletin. You will know, how much travel is required.
Yeah, and for us, it's the same thing. We have some field representatives that are on the road a lot. We have folks that travel zero, that have never traveled, and then we have folks that, might be on the road, one day a week or one day a month or one day every 6 months, depending on the work they do.
Same with the Energy Commission.
Okay. I'm going to do one more question. Is citizenship required for these jobs? Are permanent residents eligible?
So citizenship is not necessarily required, but you do have to show that you are eligible or you can work in the U.S. legitimately.
Okay. All right.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us at this virtual job fair. As you've heard, California has diverse opportunities to support energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, and other sustainability programs. If you want to continue doing important work for the good of our planet, our message is simple. Come west. California is hiring. On behalf of the CPUC, CARB, and CEC, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you.